Alright, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack what is frankly a fascinating, century-long history of foreign military presence in the Middle East. If we want to truly understand today's rapidly escalating conflicts, we literally have to look backwards. We're going to explore the major transition of foreign military presence from the British Empire straight to America, outline those massive historical turning points like World War I and World War II, and really analyze exactly how these military bases are used to maintain geopolitical control over local Arab monarchies. Now, you might be looking at the news recently and wondering about this modern paradox. Why is Iran firing missiles at its neighbors? We're talking about countries like Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Well, according to the source material, Iran claims they aren't actually targeting these Muslim countries at all. Instead, they say they're specifically targeting United States and Israeli military bases located right within those borders. But that raises a massive question for us. What on earth are these giant foreign bases doing in these Arab nations in the first place? And why did the local monarchs ever let them in? To grasp this whole geopolitical puzzle, here's our agenda. We'll start with number 1, the British blueprint. 2, the American transition. 3, the Saddam Hussein catalyst. 4, expanding the base network. And finally, number 5, the modern-day fallout. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the British blueprint. So right after World War I, the mighty Ottoman Empire finally collapses. This huge power vacuum allows the British Empire to swoop in and seize control of the region. But the British knew for a fact that the local Arab populations would never just accept direct foreign rule. And that right there reveals the original blueprint for control. The British installed proxy Arab kings to basically give an illusion of local rule. They'd tell these kings, hey, you can build the roads, the bridges, the buildings, you get to be the face of the nation. But behind the scenes, the British military maintained total, absolute control over the defense, the natural resources, and the actual regional power by spreading their military bases all across the Arab world. The kings were essentially just figureheads, completely dependent on those British bases to keep their authority. Moving right along to Section 2, the American transition. Fast forward a bit, and another world war fundamentally changes the map all over again. By the end of World War II, the British Empire had fought fiercely, but they were left completely financially ruined. They simply couldn't afford to manage and maintain that massive, sprawling network of global bases anymore. So, as the British slowly packed up and withdrew, a brand new superpower was already stepping up to the plate: the United States. Seeing the writing on the wall, Arab monarchs actually started negotiating with the US before World War II even officially ended. Now, the US wanted to adopt the exact same blueprint the British had just used. They wanted massive bases to control the region's oil and leadership. But this American transition, it wasn't totally smooth sailing. They actually faced immense pushback from leaders like King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. King Faisal flat out refused this expansion. He ordered the removal of the small US bases that had popped up, literally leaving only a single American base in the entire Arab world. And according to the source, this resistance held incredibly strong right up until King Faisal was suddenly assassinated, which allowed his brother King Khalid, who happened to be much more compliant to foreign superpowers, to take over. Now we hit a major turning point in Section 3, the Saddam Hussein catalyst. Even with more compliant kings in place, America still needed a really massive, undeniable pretext to permanently set up the kind of base network the British used to have. Saddam Hussein was initially closely allied with both the US and the Arab monarchs. At their request, he fought this brutal 8-year war against Iran. But you know, wars are incredibly expensive. By the end of it, Saddam had racked up a staggering $60 billion in debt from his Arab allies. When the dust settled and they asked for their money back, Saddam flatly refused, saying he fought that war to protect them in the first place, which sparked a really bitter rivalry. What followed was a total domino effect. To squeeze Iraq's economy, Kuwait dramatically ramped up oil production, which tanked global prices. Saddam was furious and started prepping to invade Kuwait. But first, he meets with the US ambassador to sort of test the waters and gauge America's reaction. The source notes the US essentially claimed non-intervention here, telling Saddam it was just an internal Arab dispute. Believing he had a green light from the ultimate superpower, Saddam pulled the trigger and conquered the small, oil-rich nation of Kuwait in just 2 days. Alright, this is where the geopolitics take a highly controversial turn. According to the source material, the US then executes this grand strategy. The source explicitly claims that the United States presented falsified satellite imagery to the Saudi king and other Arab monarchs, allegedly showing Saddam's forces massing on their borders, ready to invade them next. Now, whether that threat was real or entirely fabricated, the result was absolute, undeniable panic. Terrified of Saddam's newly proven military might, the Arab monarchs literally begged the United States for protection. Which brings us right to the payoff of that strategy in Section 4, expanding the base network. So the US agrees to protect these monarchs, but there's a catch. They'd only do it on the condition that they could build massive, permanent military bases on Arab soil. Out of options, the kings bowed to the demands. Almost overnight, bases spring up in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. But here is the absolutely crucial twist you need to take away from this. After Saddam was pushed out of Kuwait, those US bases didn't pack up and leave. Instead, over the next 40 years, the source details how they became permanent launch pads to project power all across the Middle East. We're talking about being used for the 20-year war in Afghanistan, strikes in Syria, taking down Gaddafi in Libya. And importantly, the source emphasizes these bases are frequently used to protect Israeli interests, citing one specific example where the US fired 1,000 missiles at Yemen from these bases just to stop blockades that were impacting Israel's economy. And all that history leads us straight into our final chapter, Section 5, the modern-day fallout. See, for 40 years, these bases operated with pretty much total impunity. But recently, that changed. According to the source, Iran has become the very first Islamic nation to directly strike back at these specific US installations. They allegedly used a really sophisticated tactic, sending rapid swarms of 50 to 60 drones to completely overwhelm US air defenses, and then immediately following that up with hypersonic missiles. The source claims there's been significant, though heavily contested, damage across the entire region. They state the massive Arifjan warehouse in Kuwait was hit so hard troops had to hide out in local hotels. A major refueling jet was destroyed in Iraq. 5 large US ships were destroyed over in Saudi Arabia, and a base in the UAE was specifically targeted as direct retaliation for a prior strike on an Iranian school. Just to put the sheer scale of these retaliatory attacks into perspective for a second, the source claims that the strikes on the US base in Qatar completely destroyed America's largest radar system in the region. You want to know the value of that single piece of equipment? Over $1 billion. It really makes you realize the unbelievable financial weight of maintaining this century-old military footprint. But, as is always the case in the fog of war, things get incredibly murky here. The source material also brings up a very serious allegation regarding civilian casualties during these strikes. It claims that local authorities in Qatar and Saudi Arabia have actually arrested alleged Mossad and CIA agents. The narrative presented by the source here is that these agents were actively planting bombs in civilian areas as false flag operations, specifically designed to frame Iran and ignite a massive sectarian Shia-Sunni war. It's a really stark reminder of the intense covert intelligence battles allegedly happening entirely in the shadows. When you view it from the perspective of the source material, everything traces right back to that original British blueprint. This quote, which is paraphrased from Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, draws a direct, unavoidable line between the current violence and that historical legacy. From their viewpoint, the root cause of all this regional instability isn't just random, isolated disputes. It's inextricably tied to the continued presence of foreign military bases dictating the regional power dynamics. So what does this all mean for us? We've traced the entire arc, from the fall of the Ottoman Empire to the strategic chess moves of the British, through the American transition and right up to today's hypersonic missile strikes. Based on this chronological history detailed in our source, we have to ask ourselves a pretty heavy question. Are we currently witnessing the explosive end of a 100-year geopolitical strategy in the Arab world? Or is this just the next bloody chapter in a very long history of foreign control? It's a massive question for sure, but understanding the history gives us a completely different, eye-opening lens to view the nightly news through. Thanks so much for exploring this explainer with me today.